Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for another Q-Tips session. I'm Elizabeth Miller, CEO at Quaint Business Solutions, and Quaint is a SAP B1 provider who values excellence in customer service, and we love sharing our knowledge of the B1 application with you all. So that's what we're doing today. Today we're expanding on a previous webinar that we had on the basics of query writing to give you a bit more advanced functions. And we're hoping that from this, you'll be able to be empowered to continue your query writing journey and get all the information that you desire out of your SAP B1 system. So that is what we are here to do today. We are going to be covering aggregate functions, as well as how to use them with the group by function, when to use the having function versus the where function. Also, we're going to be talking about how to use the order by clause, as well as when to use the top function in your select statement. Then we'll look at some examples of case statements and some of the gotchas in that area, as well as reviewing the SAP variables and stored variable options, how to declare them and use them in a simple form. We'll touch on a little bit of the difference between SQL and HANA in that syntax. And then we likely will not have time today, but we have a takeaway for you on our website, which expands even farther into some more complicated things with regards to unions, when to use the union or union all function, as well as how you can use subqueries to expand even farther. So to start, let's talk about aggregate functions. So what are aggregate functions? Aggregate functions perform a calculation on a set of values, and they return back a single result for you. So these are commonly used in large data sets, and you almost always see them grouped or in combination with the group by clause. Some of the common aggregate functions that you will see, and you've heard of before, are count, which returns the number of rows. You can do a summation, which returns a total, average, and max and mins. Those are the main ones that we usually hear about. Today, I'm going to give you an example of one using the count function. So we're going to be kind of jumping back and forth, just so you know, showing you some of the specifics in the slides. And the slides are also a takeaway, so feel free to take notes, but know that there is a downloadable version of all the information shared here today on our website for you, including that extra takeaway and some other goodies. So be sure to go out there. But jumping into the system, let's kind of walk through an aggregate function. So if you recall from our basic writing before, we're going to be using the query generator. So it's in our tools, queries, query generator. And I'm not going to go through all the functions of this. If you missed that portion, feel free to look back to that webinar to get some of the specifics on these different functions. Today, we're going to be expanding on that, so I won't touch on those again. But for our example right now of a count aggregate function, we're going to be using the OCRD table, which is our business partner master table. And what we would do is there's not a preset condition, like, you can do some of these things over here, like we talked about before in our where condition, but we can just type in our select statement here. And I'm just going to say that I want to count and see how many of the BP records, how many do I have in total? So I can type in just like this, and I'm going to click execute. Oh, actually, you can also rename aggregate functions. So what I'm going to show you real quick is I run this and you'll see it gives me a total. I currently in this demo database have 24 BP records, but you'll see I have no header here. Just a reminder, I'm going to throw in little tidbits as we go, but a reminder, you can always rename columns. And with aggregate functions, you don't get that default column header that you do when you grab an actual field name. So here I could say number of BPs. So I'm just going to say to name it that. And you'll see now I have that column header. So that's a simple example of how to do an aggregate, but let's jazz it up a little bit. So what I really want is that's a count of all my BPs, but let's see, what does it look like if I wanted to know a count of maybe how many BPs I have by a specific business partner group. So now I'm going to add my group table here. And remember shortcut, if you know the table, you can use that and type it in. I'm going to just remind you that you also have on these bolded texts here, you can click and hold until the little white box shows drag and drop as a cheat. And SAP will grab that table for you and do what it believes is the correct join. Watch that. It's not always correct, but in this case, it is exactly what I wanted. So I am joining the OCRD table to the OCRG. Joining the BP master with the group code. And now I'm going to add here that I want the group name, and then I want to count by the group name. So I'm adding group name to my select. And then just for showing you an error message here, I am not going to do anything else but that. I'm going to click execute, and you're going to see down here this red line. I get an error because it's telling me, hey, you have an aggregate function, but you didn't actually group by anything. We don't know what you're trying to group by. So what I actually am missing is that despite putting the group name in my select as to what I want to see, I have to use the group by function to get a count on that. So any column that basically, if you use an aggregate, anything that's not an aggregate column has to be defined down in your group by clause. So I'm just going to add the one I have. I could have multiples, but in this case, I just have the one. I'm going to add it here, and now I should have a successful message, and I do. And you'll see that I have the group name here, and I have a total now by that of all the BPs that are by each specific group. Okay, so that's how we can jazz it up there. But now let's go back to our slides for a minute, and then we're going to continue to add to this example and show you different things that we can do as we go along here. All right, so we talked about the group by. This is a reminder, kind of a refresher from our last webinar of just the different query sections we have available to us and what they do. So we have the select statement, which actually is the result set. It shows us everything that we want to see. That's where you can specify exact columns, rename them, all things like that. The from is where we have our table names, where we are getting the specific data, how everything is joined together. Our where clause is where we will be filtering out specific information. And then now we've just kind of introduced that group by clause, which is where we're grouping based on those aggregate functions like sum and count. And then we have a having clause, which is a condition on the group by. It's not always used that often, but I want to show you that that's available because there are some limitations between the where clause and when is a good time to use where versus having. And then we'll get into, after this little section, we'll get into the order by clause, which is how you sort and everything. The order of this does matter. So if you do not have the sections in the right order, if you are manually typing out a SQL query, you will get errors. So this is just to help you represent the order and how it should look if you were using everything, and just a reminder on what each does. So again, let's talk about when should I use having versus when should I use where. So the where function filters out rows before your grouping is done. This is not usually used and cannot really be used with aggregate functions like that count function that we were just showing. However, your having section allows you to use the aggregate functions in that, and it filters after the group by clause. So if we go, these are a couple examples just for in the slides for the takeaway, but I'm going to show you this exact thing here in our example. So if we go back to SAP here for a second, we're going to continue to expand on this, and I'm going to make this just a little bit prettier so we can read our sections. So there's our select, here's our from, and here's our group by, okay? So we have that going on. So let's say that in addition to this, I really only wanted to see group names where there was an O in it for some reason. So I'm going to use my where clause for that because it has really nothing to do with the aggregate, right? I just am trying to filter the data presented to me. So I'm going to put in here where the group name is like, and just a reminder from our previous thing, you do have the different options from our condition statement where you can do things like greater than, equal to. In this case, I'm using a wildcard that's basically saying, look for anything in the name that has an O somewhere in it. I could do a starts with O, which is a slightly different syntax, or ends with O. In this case, I'm just saying where it has O in it. So if I wanted to see that, then we're going to do this, and you'll see everything that didn't have an O somewhere in the name has been filtered out, and I still have my conditions here. But now let's say, oh, okay, on top of that, what I really want to see is I only want to see things where there's more than, let's say, three BPs in a group. So which groups have 3 or more BPs in them? Well, in that case, I can't use the where clause because the where clause, I'll get an error. It does not like our aggregate functions, but I can use the having clause. So I'm going to add having, and here I'm going to say where the count is greater than or equal to 3. And now I should get even smaller set. Okay, so now I have a couple things going on. I'm already filtering by that group, so anything that has an O in it, and I'm also only getting where the count has greater than 3. I could, not use the where clause at all. And I could just, and that little dash, just so you know, in SQL, it will take that field out for me, or that section out for me. And so it's not reading that where clause line at the moment. Without me deleting it, I can easily just do the dash to note it out. But anyway, it is now showing me anything like this one that has the, did not have an O in it. I'm showing that as well. I can use them in separately, or I can use them together. So just trying to show you an example of how you could kind of use those, and when would be a good option to use one or the other. Okay, so let's continue to expand on this and add to our repertoire here. So what else can we do? We can add and talk about the order by and top clause. So the order by is a way to sort your results by one or more columns. You can add extra syntax into it to tell it whether it's do you want to sort by ascending or descending. Like I said, you can sort multiples. By default, SAP assumes you want ascending order. You do not have to put the ASC after it. If you want ascending, it would automatically do that by the first column in your order by, okay? If you want it descending, though, you have to state that with the extra syntax of the DESC. The order by does not limit anything as far as results. It is only reordering and sorting automatically for you. The top function that we can use in our select statement, however, will actually limit the results coming back. A lot of times you can use this in conjunction with the order by, but in general, that's the difference. Top limits, and the order by is just going to sort. So let's jump back in. And let's show with this example what that kind of looks like, okay? So again, I'm going to take a couple of these off just so we can see here a full set. If I said I want to, right now you can see it's trying to order by this. Let's say I want to, actually, I'm going to use a different example. We're going to go back to just our OCRD record here for a second. So 1 second here. We're going to grab, let's see, card code, card name, and card type. And for a second, we'll just see, okay, so you see my full list. I have customers, I have leads, I have suppliers in here. And let's say that I want to sort by card type, and then I want to sort by card name. But in card name, I actually want to do descending order. So I'm going to add the DESC here. So what you're going to see is, despite the fact that normally when you're creating a query, whatever your first item is in your select is what it's going to automatically sort by. I asked it to sort by card type first and then do the card name second. So instead of having, you see now that I have the results in all the customers are first, then the leads, and then the suppliers. And inside of the customers, I have it by the card name. So I'm getting from Z to A this time. So you'll see the web customers first. And I can change this order however I want. But that's a way, you can always, when you have the SQL results, you can double click on a column and have it resort automatically. But if in your query, you automatically wanted it sorted a certain way, then this is what that order by does for you, okay? Now, let's say, what then is the top? Okay, so we can keep our order by clause here. And again, I'm just doing this so you can see the different sections. Let's say I really just want to see the top 10. What I can do is in my select, if I want to see the top 10, I could just say top 10, say how many number I want, and I can click execute, and I'm just going to get 10 records. So it's still with the order by, it was already sorted, and then I'm getting the top 10. Okay. If I did not have this sort in here, just a reminder, it's gonna, in this case, still give me top 10, but I'm going to get the top 10 based on whatever the original result is, which was by BP code. Because I started with customers with C's, it's still sorting that way. Okay. You can also, in addition to just a flat number, you can use percentages as well. So you could say top 20%, let's say. And all the syntax here is just that number, and then you add percent afterwards. And see, out of my 25 results or whatever, it's taking the top percentage and it's giving me that. So a couple different options. Again, the top function is used in the select statement. It limits the amount of rows being back based on all the rest of the criteria in your SQL statement. You can use a flat number or a percentage. Your order by is simply a way to resort and automatically order or filter the results based on a sequence that you want. Okay, but you can still manually do your double click and resort however is needed. All right. Let's move on to some more complicated things. Okay, so let's talk about case statements. Case statements are another fantastic function that we use all the time in our query writing. A case statement allows you to apply conditional logic inside of your query. It is a if then else kind of statement. Okay, so we have the syntax that we're using is we have when, which specifies what the condition is. We have then, which tells us what the result should be based on that condition. And we have the option of doing an else, which I will show you in our example here. It is not required to use the else. You can just do when thens the whole time, but an else is an option. And then a requirement is at the end of our case statement, whenever we're done with all of our when statements, we have to put end so the system knows that it's the end. And we can also rename, which I'll show you in our example. We can rename the column because, again, this is like the aggregate. When you're doing custom things in here, it doesn't know what to name the column, so you have to provide the name if you desire. Key notes about our case statement. Order absolutely matters. If you are not getting the result that you are expecting in a case statement, I can tell you it is likely the ordering. I will show you an example of this here shortly. Case statements can work with aggregates. So in your when area, you can use aggregates to sort things. Your case statements can also be used in multiple different sections. Today, we will see it in the select specifically where it's most commonly used, and I will also show you it in the order by. And then you can return different data types, meaning you can return text or number or decimal or whatever, but all your return values. So what this means is when you say when, then, everything in your thens has to be the same. You can't say when the word is red, return 1, and then when it's blue, return green. Okay, it has to be all the same data types. You have to have all numbers as a return or all text as a return. Okay, you can't mix them in the thens. Okay, so let's see an example. So jumping back in for the sake of time, I have one kind of pre-written so you don't have to watch me write everything out, but we'll walk through it. Alrighty, so here's what we're doing here. In this example, we're looking at the OA and B table, which is the invoice table. And we are basically saying, show me all the invoices right now. I want to see in my select, I want to see the doc number and the document total. And then I want you to tell me, based on our case statement logic, if the document total is greater or equal to 10,000, then I want a result of it's a large order. If it is greater or equal to 5,000, then it's medium. If it's greater or equal to 1,000, then small. And anything else that doesn't fall, equal to 1,000 or greater, then we're just going to say it's minuscule. Here's our end that closes out our case statement, and we're renaming it as order size. So let's see what this result looks like. So we see here we have our document number, we have our document totals, and then based on what this document total is from my logic, and again, this is a very simple example, they can get very, very complicated, you will see an order size with the result. Okay? So why does order matter? Let's just, for instance, right now I am getting the result I desire, but let's say that I had this reordered like this. Okay. Logically speaking, it still makes sense in our head, right? We're saying, okay, when it's greater or equal to 5,000, it's medium, but if it's greater than or equal to 10,000, it's large. It makes sense in our head, but the way that the programming works, it's reading from a top-down approach. So when it hits this logic and it says this is greater or equal to 5,000, everything that's greater or equal to 5,000 is going to be called medium. It never gets to this one because this one rings true first, if that makes sense. Okay. So again, it's a top down. It's trying to read from the top, find the result that fits the scenario. And if it finds one that's first, it'll never make it to the second one, which is why order matters. So in this example, again, let's just see this result. You'll see now anything that's even over that 10,000, everything is coded as medium, because of that top-down approach. So again, if I move this back, where now if it fell between those two, I should only get this result if it's over 10,000 or equal to 10,000. Otherwise, it's going to fall into this middle tier. Now you'll see again where, yep, sure enough, order was the problem there. Okay. So order matters. If you're not getting a result, try your reordering and see how it works out for you. But we also said that case statements can be used in multiple different places. And I promised you an example of this in the select, as we see here, and then in an order by. So right now you can see our results are ordering by that first column. It's going by document number, but really I want it ordered by this case statement. How in the world am I going to do that? All right, so we're going to add our order by here. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to copy down this whole part of the case statement into our order by clause. The one part we're not going to do, and I'm going to show you the error so that you see it, is if we copied this whole thing with that renaming column, we're going to get a lovely little error which says, hey, we don't know what this syntax of as is. That's because that renumbering really only applies to your select statement area. If you use aggregates or anything, or the case statements like this, the only place you want that renaming is in the select. Okay. Everywhere else, if you're copying through to other sections, take it off because you're going to get that syntax error. So in this order by, we're going to take that part off. The rest of the case stays exactly the same. And then we're going to click execute, and you're going to see that it reordered based on order size. Okay. And again, we could use the descending, ascending, whatever, but that's what we're getting here. All right. So that's kind of how to use simple case statements. And again, I apologize for the limited time, but I'm trying to get through all the things that we had, all the goodies we had for you today. All right, so let's talk. Our last section for today is going to be on the stored variables and declarations. So last time we talked very briefly about the fact that SAP allows you to use some prompted variables, which you'll see down here in our text with that %0, %1, %2. So we have the option in SAP user interface to have the user give us some input into the system. But in addition to that, what we didn't talk about last time is that we can store variables. So we can like kind of hard code a variable that is then used through the system. Why would we want to use variables? Well, a lot of times a variable is great if you have a very complicated query or very long query, and you're going to be using the same number over and over and over again, or same value over and over again. It just makes sense maybe to use a stored variable instead of typing everything out. That way, if you ever need to change that variable, you can easily change it at the top of the query in one place, and it will flow through to your whole query without having to reprompt. So that's one reason. And let's talk about, like, let's see an example. Oh, wait, let me first explain. There is a difference. What I'm showing you today, I'm showing you the SQL version. HANA has a very different syntax for stored variables and declaring your variables in a query. We happen to have a very nice document showcasing different syntax between SQL and HANA. I encourage you to go out to our website and our resources page. Not only download this one and have it readily available for yourself with some of those cheats, but continuously look out to our resource page, because we're always adding great goodies from you from these webinars and things that will benefit you in different ways. So again, I'm not going to touch base on the HANA version, but go out there and see it. We're going to focus on SQL, which a lot of you are still on right now. So this is the syntax that is used is very important. So at the top of your query, you will have a couple extra sections that you may not have seen before when you're working with stored variables, excuse me. And that is the declaring of the variable and the setting of the variable. And again, we're going to walk through this, but this is some syntax to kind of help you. And what you will see is that we have to do the word declare. Then we're going to use the @ symbol, and we're going to name the variable whatever name we want. And then we have to say what kind of type of variable, what's the data type for this variable, which we'll go over a few examples of that. So is it an integer? Is it a decimal? Is it a long text? What is it? And then the next section that's very important for these is the set section, which is where you are using the word set. You're saying that variable name that you already just declared, so @ variable name, and equals something. Okay, so again, this can be our stored like static text value that I'll show you an example of, or it can be our user prompt, which I'm gonna go into an example where we start with the stored and then we add some variable prompt ones so you can see what that looks like. But let's just touch base real quick on the data types. This is just a few. Google is fantastic. If you Google SAP or SQL variable data types, you will find a whole list, but here are a list of just a lot of common ones and how to use them. We won't go over all of these, but you see here there's an integer, which is just whole numbers. You have decimals, where you can declare the number of digits and how many decimal points there should be. There's variable character lengths, which specifies the max length of the text that it can be. You can do date, time. So you have to declare it in some type of text. These are the most common ones at your disposal. Again, download this so you have those available, or Google. All right, so this is the end result of the example we're going to get to, but I'm going to jump into the system and we're going to kind of build this piece by piece. All right, so I have the startings of this one, again, for time's sake. So exactly what we were talking about. What are we trying to do here? Well, let's talk through it real quick as to what the end result is that we're looking for in this one. So you can see we are using INV1. That is the invoice row table. Basically, what we are trying to do in this is we wanted to know a total quantity by item, where the quantity is over a specific amount. So basically we're saying, how much of a specific item did I sell? I want to know which items I sold more than 10 of. And so I am pulling the data from the INV1 table. I'm going to be showing the item code, the description, and then again, this is why we did that whole building of all our different stuff today. We have our aggregate, which I'm going to be summing the the quantity off the row, and I'm renaming that as total quantity. You'll see I have to do my group by. This is a review for what we went over at the beginning. I'm grouping by all the other regular columns that are not aggregates, okay? So I have to, in this case, I have item code and description. Both of those have to be in my group by. And then I'm saying having, and I want to show only stuff that has the sum total, right, over a specific amount, which is the variable that we're going to talk about here in a second. So you see that at min sales. And then I'm ordering, just for the purposes of showing the example with the order by, I'm ordering by that aggregate in descending order. Okay. So to recap our variable section here, you'll see at the very top, I have that declare, and I decided to name my variable minimum sales. So I have at min sales. This is an integer, which means it's a whole number that I'm giving it. And then I have my set, and I'm doing set the min sales, and right now I'm saying 10. I can change this variable though without changing it anywhere else in the system, and anywhere that variable is, it will change. Okay, so let's just run this and see what we get so far. Let me expand this. All right, so right now I'm getting, for all of time, basically every item group totaled, and I'm seeing only results that are over 10. And it is, again, ordered by that descending of our aggregate sum. So I'm getting the largest first and going down. I could change this to say, I really only want to see anything over 500. Again, the nice thing about variables, it's right there at the top. I don't do anything else in my query. I run it and boom, anything over 500 is showing. Okay, so that is a way to do a set stored variable, but let's add those dynamic variables from the customer, right? Or from the user. We want them to be able to prompt, and maybe we want to add a date range. This is running for all of time in the system, and really I just want to see maybe this year's results. So let's add these. I'm going to have to declare some new ones. So we're going to declare, let's say, our start date. And this is going to be a data type of date. And then I also need an end date. So I'm going to do this, and that's also data type of date. And then down here, I have to do my sets. But in this case, so I'm going to set at start date equal to, and this time I don't want to use a set thing. I want to use those user prompts, which is that special syntax we touched base on before. And again, if you need the cheat in the query generator, you have that little extra window that you can double click. But it is these little symbols with the brackets to say variable 0. That's our starting variable. And then I want them to use the end date equal to, and they're going to prompt them for the another end date. Okay. Important to note that for each different one, you want to make sure the numbering of the variables is correct. If you use 0 accidentally twice, you'd only get one user prompt. And so to get the individual user prompts that you really want, you need to make sure your numbering is correct in there. Okay, now I will tell you, because as you guys are probably going to be taking this away and using it, we will get an error as we're using this, and I'll have to show you what to do in that case. But the other thing we want to do is we have to add into our where statement, because right now we've declared and set the variables. We're going to say that the user is going to be prompted and they're going to give us something, but we don't have it in our actual data set to do anything with those variables. So we need to add our where. And again, remember the ordering matters. So in here, we're going to say where our doc date from this table. So T0 doc date is greater than or equal to, and instead of saying a specific date, like normally we would, hard code a date, we're going to use our variable here. So we're going to say at start date. So whatever they put in, and where our doc date is less than or equal to our ending date variable. Okay. Now, I am not exactly sure what the reason is, and if any of my other consultants know exactly why this happens, when I run this, I'm going to get an error. It's something to do with sometimes SAP is picky about these variables. And so I'm going to show you a cheat on how to get around it. But when I run this, it's going to tell me there's an incorrect syntax. There's really not. It has, sometimes our syntax errors have nothing to do with what you're doing. It's just reading something and it's angry about it. The reason it's angry is it doesn't know exactly what I want from these user inputs. Normally the user inputs in a very simple case, you would do this and it would run and it would be fine. But for some reason in the declares, in the UI with these variables, the user prompted variables, it can be very picky. And this is why I wanted to show you. And you will get weird errors. And the reason why is you kind of have to link those variables back to a table in SAP. And this is why I want to show you this, because it's weird. What we do then is we create this little notation area in two places. We're going to create it here and we're going to tell it, hey, we're looking at this is related to the invoices table. We're going to do this up here. And we're saying, these variables are kind of all coming from OINV as a header table. We could say INV1 as well. For this example, I'm just showing OINV. And next to these variables, then I kind of tell it that in a note that this variable, I want you to kind of prompt them from already preset document dates in the system. So before this variable here, I'm going to put in this little note syntax again, just saying from this table up here at the top that I want them to be looking at this doc date. So once I do this, what that's doing is instead of being a blank box, it's pulling preset dates from this table in SAP as date values that you can choose from, even though you can manually overwrite them in the user prompt. It needs for some reason with the variables to have some kind of table that it can pull from to give them examples, okay? And so once we do that, this little preset area and this little preset, we should get our desired result, which is that when we run this, like we wanted, not an error, but we're getting those prompts. So you'll notice again, we have three declared variables. One is static, so it's not prompting me for that. It's only prompting me for the two start and end dates, which is what I want. And so now if I click on that ellipsis, you'll see I'm getting document dates. This is the posting date from that table. Before that, it was erroring because it didn't know where to pull. Now, when I told it, go from OINV, show me doc dates, I get these. I don't have to use that, though. I don't have to use it, but it's something that SAP needs. So instead, I'm just going to type in that I want to run it for this year, the beginning of the year through today's date. I'm using T as the shortcut for today's date. If you didn't know that, there's a freebie. And now I'm going to click OK. So I am prompting it. It's grabbing these values and it's going to filter the rest based on the value if I did it right. What did I do wrong?
In the where clause.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Lauren, everyone, fantastic. Yes, I named this incorrectly. Okay, thank you so much. All right, so the beginning again, beginning of the year through today's date, the T, click OK, and it says I don't have anything for this year. Okay, so I know it's actually prompting it then. Let's try through 2020 to today. Okay, now I've got some results, and you'll see some of my data in this demo database is old. But basically what I was able to do was I was now able to put in through a user prompt a specific date range to filter those results by. I'm now seeing the item code sold over a specific amount, which was this 500 amount. I bet you if I move this back to 10 and I run it for this year, I might actually, get some results. Okay. So you can, in your declared variables here, you can have static, you can have user prompted, you can use a combination of both. You can have as many as you want. And it just helps kind of the flow of data. It helps you if you have really long text or you have union queries, which again is our takeaway document because we don't have time to go over that today. If you have many queries, instead of having to change all the where statements and many, many different queries, you just change it in one area at the top with your variable. You use that common variable through the whole thing. It's a really nice way to increase your query writing knowledge and efficiency. Okay, so let's go back, and I think that's all we are going over today. Are there any questions over what we had, or any other questions that you may have for me and my amazing consultants here that are on with me today? Alrighty. Well, if there's no questions, again, I just want to remind you that you can go out to our website. On our resources page, we have that SQL versus HANA syntax takeaway. We also have all the notes from our slideshow today for this query. And also be sure to go out to our YouTube channel. We are posting all of our webinars and additional tutorials as we go along and do some in SAP on our YouTube channel for you to rewatch at any time. If you have any further questions or need guidance as you start practicing and doing some things, feel free to reach out to your own partner. If you're a Quaint customer, reach out to your main consultant. We'd be happy to go over that with you. We can also do personalized SQL tutorial trainings if anybody desires that. But I hope this gave you a little bit more for your query writing skills. And thank you for attending today. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.